Okay, so this morning what we're offering is the opportunity to look at values and how values are really important to us and why they drive behaviour. And once we start to recognise what's important to us and what's driving our behaviour, we can start thinking about, is that something that I want to continue with, or is there a value I'd like to make a little bit of change to? And then what we can do down the track, which is in 2 weeks from now, we're doing letting go of limits. And sometimes our values actually have a limit attached to the tail of them. It's like the sperm, isn't it? And they attach to the value and keeps it in its place. Let me show you that in a picture so you're more knowledgeable about that. So what we have is a value, right? So this could be your value around money. This could be your value around relationships. This could be your value around career. This could be your value around religion and spirituality. Does that make sense? Can you see how they're all connected?
Lynda, do you have just one value for one particular aspect in your life? So for example, with finance, are you just limited, do you have just one value for that?
No, you'll have quite a few. And we'll go through that in a minute because I'm going to actually ask you to write them out. Yeah? So it'll be what's important to you, and to bring up your values around career, for example, you will find out what your values are around money. To bring up your values around love, for example, we may do values around relationships. And where does love sit? So attached to each of your values though, so let's say here's your values around money, attached to that value, you're going to have beliefs. What beliefs have you guys got around the value of money? What have you got? What were you, when you were a kid growing up, what did mum and dad say about earning money?
You have to work hard.
You have to work hard, yep.
Invest, don't spend it all.
Invest, yep. Save, yeah. Anything else?
Money is very useful in terms of helping others.
Helping others, perfect.
Yes.
What else?
You need to be educated to earn money.
Need to be educated, right? My parents, I was just telling Janice this morning, made each of us 7 kids have 5 years of secondary education. So if we wanted to leave in what we had called year 10 here, we had to go and do a year of TAFE or college. After that, that was, I mean, I was wanting to go to uni, so it was okay. But and my sister was a fashion designer. She went to fashion tech. My brother went into agriculture. Everyone, Bronwyn did secretarial courses. Everyone did another year if they left before those 5 years of secondary education. And so they absolutely valued education. Does that make sense? In getting you, is it the be all and end all? No. And are we always being educated? I believe that most of my learning has been since I left school.
Always.
Yeah. I used to take Nathan out of school and take him with me traveling because I believed that what he got through that traveling and what he learned about people and the environment, whether it was in Australia or outside, was just so valuable. Yeah. So does that make sense here? So you've got these beliefs, and these beliefs are keeping that value in place. So by working out what that value is today, and then in 2 weeks from now, we're going to release a limiting belief. Wow, we can shake the boundaries of that value and get to think. You can start thinking about now what's important to you around that subject. And we're going to pick one subject and only work with that one subject. So how do we develop values? Who's got an idea of how we developed values? What happened? How did we get what we value?
Well, I guess a lot has come from the family and teachers, the closest one.
Yes.
The experience you had, the books you read, the people you met.
Yes.
Your culture.
Yes. And that's what culture is. Culture is a whole bunch of habits and experiences. That's what we call culture. So people come from a particular culture that they'll die for, and it's because they've been conditioned and they've copied what's important to them. And that's deemed to be important. And so if it's not working for them, they have to then go through, what would I like to change about that? That's why when some people come to Australia or some Australians go elsewhere, they may not fit in with the culture. Yeah. When I was in Africa, I got into trouble because I was always walking ahead of the truck. I wanted to see the people, but I was walking ahead one day in shorts and a singlet top, as you do. And that was not kosher. And I had a man chasing me. Oops. So I had to learn what was respectable on a Sunday in certain parts of Africa in order to go back and really be a part and understand and respect the culture at that time. So we absolutely copy behavior as we're a kid growing up. So for the first 0 to 7 years, all we do is take everything in from mum and dad. And we think that's the way people do it. And the reason why it's so important is because they give it to us every day. The way you should eat, the way you should present yourself in front of public, the way you should address yourself when you're facing a person, the way you should read a book, and the way you shouldn't read a book, the way you should go outside and play, the way you should come in at 4 o'clock because the weather's changing and you could get asthma. Anyone hear some of these? Sorry, Eddie. So it's about what we took on board, and it was repeated every day. So it became a real part of our structure. And because 96% is subconscious, all we had then was our subconscious. So we just accepted that. Does that make sense? And then we started to say, but why, but why, but why, but why, but why? Now we're starting to develop our consciousness. And even though we're still taking things in because we're in the habit of doing that, we're starting to ask why. Why do we have to eat with our left hand or right hand? Why do we have to use a spoon? Why? My son said, I said to my son, it may not be good to continue with eating broccoli with your hands, because if we go to a restaurant, that's not really kosher. However, I didn't want to stop him eating a whole thing of broccoli with his hands because he was given that from a baby to eat broccoli and those sorts of things. So, but one day he said to me, why do my clothes have to match? And I went, that's interesting. I said, they don't actually. But being a visual, it was important to me to have matching clothes. For him being a kinesthetic, it was important that they just were comfortable. Does that make sense? So it was important for him that clothing was comfortable, not necessarily matching. The other thing in that 0 to 7 is that not only were we imprinted by parents, but also teachers. And what about people who cared for us? And what about the next door neighbour? How much influence did they have? What about grandparents? So we got all these different things that are important to you. And how vivacious were they in letting you know that that's important if you're a member of this family? Interesting, isn't it? Yeah? And then we started to model. So from 7 to 14, we modeled other people's behaviour and we took on their values. So all this is developing values. What's important to us? So it's important. My mother and father didn't have much money, but they had a really good ethics around food. It was so important for them to have good food. So for 7 kids, 9 in the family, we had three courses to every meal. It was, you know, full on veggies and your protein, and there was no TV on. When we had dinner, it was about conversation. That was important, that we all conversed about our day and that we ate good food. Yeah. One of those habits are, how many people had this habit where you had to finish everything on your plate?
Absolutely.
What has that led to today?
I don't know if they can see us though.
You get bigger.
We get bigger. So I've got a new rule in my house. You stop when you're
But
full.
where's our picture?
You stop when you're full. And if you read my book, Ages and Attitude, the work that Mario Martinez did in the blue zone areas was exactly one of the things that kept these people living past 100. They stopped when they were full. They didn't eat what the rest of the food was. The minute they felt full, they stopped, and they also ate mostly vegetarian, and if they ate meat, it was always grass-fed, so they went out of their way to find it, whether it was chicken, whether it was meat, whether it was eggs, whatever it was, fish, always deep ocean stuff. So they had tofus and stuff, but they had their great sources of food, and they ate until they're full. Another habit they had was to celebrate. So Janice and Bronwyn and I have just done 2 years of welcome girls, 2 years of detoxing, 2 weeks of detoxing, and so last night we went out and celebrated. We might have put on point 2, but that's okay. So welcome Lynda and Shelley from Inverell.
Hey. Hi.
Now we're just talking about values and how you get your values. Now, so for the first 7 years and 14 years, we're learning other people's values. We're copying other people. Yeah. Then from 14 to 21, we start to socialize. Now, this is where you're going to start to challenge your values. So you're going to see somebody else and you're going to go, how come they can come home at 1 o'clock and I've got to be home at 11? How come they can drink alcohol and I'm not allowed to? How come they're smoking and I think health is important? Do you see what I'm saying? So whether we adopt some of their values or not, but we're going to start to challenge what our parents taught us because of what they valued versus what we're now witnessing from our peer group. Because we're going to hear things in school that are different. We're going to hear things from the peer group. A lady in my cooking class said to me once, you mentioned in home science that your mother bought a whole sheep. Yeah. She said, does that sheep just stay in your backyard and you just cut off a leg when you need it? She just didn't have no concept of a family being that big that they bought sheep in the whole sheep. She had no concept of that. So she had no values about how important that was for my parents to buy in bulk so that they could feed a family frugally and yet sufficiently. Does that make sense? Yeah. So because food, as I said, was an importance in my families. That, you needed some good food in your belly. A mum would have a pot on the stove on the weekend and you came in when you could from your different sports. You ate what you could and then you went out. So food was very important to my mother and father. Does that make sense? So what about those 14-year-olds and 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds that start really giving mum and dad a hard time because Johnny can do this and Sally can do that? Who went through that?
Still am.
Still am? You've got a 17-year-old?
Just turned 18.
18-year-old. I remember Nathan being challenging at 17. I absolutely did. He would go and get a job delivering pizzas, but he would come home and have a really good meal. At least the importance of food had passed on, and he'd eat a really good dinner. Then he'd go and serve pizzas. He probably ate a pizza too, knowing him. But it was the values. But then all of a sudden, our values are clashing because the kids are presenting something different. And we're going, wow. And then are we flexible enough to say that's interesting? Because that could be a great language, by the way, guys. That's interesting perception, right? Because they're not wrong or right. We're all right. So that's an interesting perception, is a great language to use then. And then you can gradually allow your value to say, well, what I was taught was this, and what you're saying is very interesting. Let me know more about that. and get them to express. Now, you don't have to agree with it. It's just that you're allowing them to express because we're all right. I really want, that's important, that everyone's right. Everyone's got a perception, and we've only got our values and our experiences in order to get to that place. So yes, you're going to be challenged. And in each of those 7 to 14, or sorry, 0 to 7, 7 to 14, 14 to 21, you are going to be challenged, and you're going to be developing your values, and then you're going to be challenging those values with other people and throwing out the ones you don't like and bringing in ones you want to change. However, your beliefs and your experiences and what you made of those experiences could be keeping some of those values where they are. Like, what about relationships? Did your parents stay together? Did they divorce very quickly? Did they, what happened in the relationships that you saw growing up? And so what do you think about relationships and what's important in a relationship? It's so different today. We've got so many kids that are being raised by 2 households. Yeah? And each family has different sets of values. And so our children are going, whoa. And so they could be clashing when they go to mum's house, clashing when they go to dad's house, because they take the value of one parent to the other. It's very interesting today, yeah? Something to think about, and something for us to be able to say to the child, okay, so that's great, and, yeah, tell me more about that value that you like or that particular thing that you want to discuss. Now, the thing that's really important here is that in your career, and this is why career is absolutely attached to money and relationships. In your career, those values that you took from 0 to 7, 7 to 14, 14 to 21, William James says you throw all those values into your career. That's why we're doing this today. You with me? Your career, your work cannot outperform your self-image. It's impossible. So all the self-image, all the values you took from growing up, you're now putting into your career until you change one of the values around you, how you feel about you. Who gets that? Who feels like they'd like to move on and there's just something that's stopping them? Yeah, and they're not quite sure, they can't quite pinpoint it. Yeah? Jan, I did not expect your hand to go up then. You are such the move on girl.
You can never stop. Never stop.
No, we want to go in sideways and say thanks for the ride, don't we, darling? So what I'm saying is that the way you value your work. Now think about this. I worked with a company up in Queensland, and I said to the lady, what did you just spend 20 grand on? And she said, marketing. I said, imagine if you spent 20 grand on someone like me who could come up and help your staff feel great about who they are. They're the best marketing tool you've ever had on the planet. Yeah, she's now the #1 real estate in that area. Because her staff are valued. They value themselves. People see that. So they put out an energy of how, how they feel about themselves and where they work. And people go, oh, where do you work? Where do you? And they attract people to themselves and therefore the company. Simply because they're changing the way they value who they are, who they be, who they do, what they do, and what they're prepared to have. So, any questions on that? So we talked quickly about, sorry?
I was just going to say, can you overhear us? Because I might need to find a mute button because Pete just came in, that was all. It's not interfering?
We can hear you. We can hear a doggy barking and a conversation, but you can...
Sorry.
That's okay. You can mute
There
or you
must be a
can...
mute button, no.
Yeah, I can mute you. However, I like it open because I like for everyone to just comment when they can rather than me having to... I'm not very tech savvy. And that's okay. That's why I have Janice. She's the guru behind the guru. So one of the things we talked about was the sources of values, and some of you mentioned that your peers growing up, your parents, your neighbours. What about religion? What about churches that we used to go to, and how did that change for you?
I grew up a good Southern Baptist girl.
Good Southern Baptist, okay.
Yeah.
Did that mean going to church every Sunday?
Yes, it meant going to church every Sunday. It meant going to Sunday school.
Yes.
Yeah, it did.
And that's very interesting, because we were too. We grew up with a Church of England father and a Methodist mother, and we became Presbyterians. So yeah. So it was really interesting. And then the Presbyterian Church became united, and we became a big part of that church because we sang. So we were the choir. It was in the country town. And if the 9 of us didn't turn up, I don't know who else they would have had. We ran the Bible study group. We ran everything. So does that make sense? And so we were a very big part of the church. And then one day they asked me to teach Sunday school. And I said, I'm really sorry, I can't do that. I'm now a representative tennis player and I have to train for tennis on a Sunday. And I didn't have a very nice minister looking after me because he didn't treat me very well after that. And I said to my mother, there's something wrong here, and why do we have to go to a building? And I started thinking about, what do I need to do about religion? What do I need to do about my feelings? Why do I need to go to a building to be spiritual or to be a Christian? And so does that make sense? Anyone else go through anything like that?
Absolutely. Yep, I'm the same.
Where you can still have your spiritual values.
Yes, I'm a woman of great faith, but my church is wherever I am.
Yes.
Yes.
And a guy said to me once, Lynda, that if you love who you are and you're at home in your own body, and this is good for all of you, this is an amazing statement. If you're at home in your own body, then when you take your body anywhere, you feel at home. Don't you love that? He said, do you sometimes, when you're at home in your body, when you feel really good about who you are and you love who you are in your own body, then when you take your body anywhere, you feel at home.
Yes.
So I can feel a bit teary leaving Inverell. I can feel a bit teary leaving Bendigo. I can feel a bit teary leaving England because I just make myself at home. I feel at home. Does that make sense? I'm comfortable with the people. I'm really feeling at home in that environment. And so all of a sudden that's home. So it's a great, what's the lesson here though? You valuing you. So you valuing you, just look at the mirror and say, what do I really value about me? That's, I think, one of the most important things. And what can I improve on so I can get more value from me? What can I do for me? Because B do have, what can I do for me to be more so that I'm now feeling at home whenever I'm in front of people, whenever I'm at home in the family, I'm comfortable within my own skin. So let's say, Viola, where were you raised, in Australia or overseas?
I was raised in Hong Kong. I was born and raised in Hong Kong. Came in late 30s with my 3 kids.
So, Viola, did you notice a very big change in the culture of the two countries?
Yes, I do. But for me, it's less so because I was brought up in a very British style kind of a high school setting. I have a really good idea how democracy and all this runs.
Yes. Great. But that's what I'm saying. If any of you think, I wonder what it would have been like for me, like you're on a farm, some of you, what would it have been like to be raised in a unit? Like today, most people are raised in a 2-bedroom unit, you know what I mean? And they have to literally go to a park to get outdoors. Or if you're in a 2-bedroom unit, what would it have been like if you were raised in the middle of Australia?
Yes.
Or on a
true.
big cattle farm? Does that make sense? Well, how different is that?
Very,
Yes.
very different.
Very different. And our values change. We start to appreciate, like we were raised on a farm. So I've seen hail come down and waste a whole crop that can't go to market. And all of a sudden my parents can't make any money. So all of a sudden I value the weather. I start valuing everything that we're doing on the farm. My mother's putting fruit and vegetables into glass jars because no one wants to buy them because they've got a hailstone on them. And so my mother would make this vacola, and we could see them, and so we still ate them, but other people didn't value them like we did. Are you with me? So geography plays a massive importance. What about media? How much does media play in your values?
Not much.
Don't watch the news.
I average 16 minutes a day on media. 16 minutes a day.
Wow. That's really good.
What about your kids though? What about your kids?
No,
what are they, how many teenage girls though are becoming anorexia because all the models out there on the magazines are skinny as? I watched
and
a
I've
girl
got teenage
in
grandchildren.
Yes. I watched a girl go from a really good sized girl to really, 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 really thin because she went on a diet rather than an eating plan. I think that language is really important.
Yes, definitely. Lifestyle choices.
So just think about what the teenagers are getting from, and what about the media where they need to be playing
cyberspace,
where they need to be playing computer. Whoa, we might need to mute. So the media and teaching us about the latest game that the kids need, or the latest thing that they must have, and they're pestering mum to go and get that thing, that toy, that computer, that this, whatever. Yeah, it's there's a lot of pressure from that. What about school? How many values did we get from our school teachers on what we should be valuing? Yeah. I remember being a lecturer at TAFE University, and a teacher came up to me and he said, have you got research on all this stuff you're teaching about nutrition? And I said, oh, absolutely. I actually went to the CSIRO and I can share some of those examples with you. I said, what's the problem? He said, oh, well, there was another teacher here and he's teaching that you don't actually need to complement, that you can get everything out of the soil. And I said, what planet is he on? Sorry. I have a value here around good nutrition. So it was really interesting that I was questioned about what I was teaching, what education. I said, don't you think that at this level of education for these students, they need to hear everybody's educational philosophy, and then they can make up their own minds about what they're going to take away from these courses?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know, but not given the option, I think is sad.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. And it's also interesting that a lot of our teachers, God love them, are very AD, everything's in fact form, and 80% of us are visual kinesthetics that need, you know, when I started, excuse me, enjoying history was when I went overseas, because I could then see it and feel it. Learning a whole bunch of dates didn't touch it for me, and I didn't appreciate it. I really appreciated it when I was traveling. So it's about valuing how much value did we put on our education, and how much time did we give it, and how much time did your parents give you? All right, so now what we're going to do is we're actually going to elicit the values. So what I'd like you to do is just choose an area, and I'm just going to show you how to write them down. So I would suggest that you pick an area, and those areas that we're looking at in your values are areas like lifestyle, career, relationship.
Up here, okay.
A lot of you could do career because that would bring up your money values. If you're doing relationship, it will bring up your love values. They're the areas of values in your life, and you'll be able to see. So for those of you, I hope it's clear enough: lifestyle, career, family, relationships, personal growth and development, health and fitness. How much value do we give health and fitness? Yeah. Spirituality. Yeah. So out of 10, if you could look at all those, which one would you say is something you need to work on? Which one would you say is something you have high values in? So I thought my values were very big on career until I was in the middle of Europe and I got a phone call saying my son had fallen ill. And I said to the organizer, I was speaking about The Secret and I was in Holland. And as much as that was all right, so now we're ready to put down and list our values. So we've chosen an area: relationships, career, whatever that area is, lifestyle, whatever the area is. And now I want you to just, you might like to close your eyes, and then when you think of something, open your eyes and write it out. So I'm going to ask you this one really important question, and it is, what is important to you about that? Whichever value you chose, what is important to you about that? And close your eyes, and whatever comes up, I want you to jot it down. And what else is important to you about that? That career or that relationship, what else is important to you? Right, now you're going to get to a point in the subconscious mind where it may empty out. It goes through these different levels. So when you get to that point, allow it and then just say, what else? What else is important to me about my career or my relationship, or what else is important to me? And write it down. Anything else? Anything else? What else is important to me about that? Who feels like they've come to the end? Okay, so just close your eyes for a moment and say, is there anything else that's really important to me about that? And when you feel like you've emptied out, just put your hand up. Great. Thanks, Jan. Thanks, Viola. Great. Thanks, Ang. Okay, great. So now what we're going to do, who's got about 10? Who's got more than 10? More? Who's got more than 10? Yeah? Wonderful. All right, so now what we're going to do, I want you to look at that list of values. And I want you to just allow your subconscious mind to look at that list, and I want you to pick out what's number 1, and on another bit of paper or down further on your page, write it out again. So what's number 1? What's the most important to me? And the subconscious mind will just pick it out of your list. What's the most important to me? And write it down. We want to get it down to 10. Some of them may join. Okay, this needs to be quick. The subconscious mind, don't make it conscious, make it subconscious, so that the subconscious mind will tell you very quickly. Remember, it grows your hair, grows your fingernails, runs the blood around your body. So I want you to trust it now to choose the values that are most important to you. All right, what's number 2? Go down your list. What's the second most important thing around that? And write it down as number 2. And go down. What's the third most important? What's the next most important? All right, we've done that. Who's got 10 now that look very clear, like they're 10 good values around that? Career, relationship, or whatever. Yeah. Yep. The quicker you do it, the more you're trusting in your subconscious mind to allow you, because otherwise the conscious mind can come up and start arguing. It's good at arguing and trying to lead you with its willpower and its ego. However, the unconscious mind is what we want to look at today. All right, now you've got that 10 of what you think is the most important. I want you to challenge it. I want you to look at number 1 and then look at number 2, because I want you to try and bring it down to 5. Look at number 1 and then look at number 2. Is number 1 more important than number 2? Yes or no, quick. And if it is, write it down again as number 1 on another bit of paper. You just keep writing it out so we're very clear. And then keep going down. Is number 2 more important than number 3? And if it isn't, switch them around.
Do you mean the one that we have just had and number 3?
Yeah, so number 1, is it more important than number 2? Yes or no? If it's yes, leave it where it is. Then if it isn't, then you move number 2 up to number 1. Right? Then you go down to number 3. Is number 2, whatever that is, more important than number 3? Yes or no? It's a quick decision, and then again, change it or leave it where it is. Is number 3 more important than number 4? Is number 1 more important than number 4? Really challenge the values to make sure that they're exactly where you want them. Is 4 more important than 5? Is 5 more important than 6? Yes or no? Change and or. And so now you've rewritten out your values in the top, maybe 5, 6, 7, whatever. You've got the top 5 to 7 values of what's important to you about that. So did anyone get a surprise in any of the values that came up that they wrote down as being some of their most important? Yeah, Janice, can you want to share?
Yeah, I chose family.
Yes.
And one thing that came up was the number one is the sense of belonging. And the second most important value is respect. And
Yes.
that is a surprise for me, not because I don't think it's valuable, but I didn't realize how high it is in the list of values for me.
Yes.
So yeah. And the third one is celebrating successes and milestones.
Wonderful.
So,
And so,
yeah.
you know, remember, relationships is not just about when you're doing family, it's about the relationship you have with self. So where does valuing me and where does respecting me come into my values?
Yeah.
Am I giving it enough attention? Is it a high value for me? And is it something I need to work on so that it can be up? Because once I respect me, guess what? My children, my partner, other people will respect me the way I'm valuing the word respect. Anyone else get any surprises? So who's excited just to know that their top 5 or 6 values now around what they've got? Yeah?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. So that's what eliciting values is. It's about really finding out what's important to you. Now, we haven't got time to take this to another level, but what I'd love to do, in 2 weeks from now, we're going to do a series on letting go of limits. And what you may find is that the reason some of those values are sitting in that position is because they've got a limiting belief on them that is holding them there. Right? So, in other words, there could be something right down the bottom of your value list that actually comes screaming up to the top once you let go of the limit around it. How cool is that?
Yeah.
So this list that you've got now is great and it's temporary. It gives you an idea, though, of what you've got. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
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 Hey, welcome, stranger. We're about to close.
Hello. I know I've been here, but I've had people around and stuff. So I've had my camera off and my thing on mute. But
Okay. Good to see you, Anna. Anna's from Dubbo, everyone.
Oh.
Hello.
Hello.
So we had people from Inverell before. Now we've got people from Dubbo. We're going right around Australia.
I just wanted to say, Lynda, thank you. I walked away because I need to talk about this, but thank you for mentioning like the time for self, because when I did like the reflection, time for me was a thing that came up that instantly made me feel guilty, because it's interesting because I want time for my relationship, family, those sorts of things,
Yes.
but it's about looking after me first. So what you said after Janice spoke was really important to me. Thank you.
And also, guilt comes up a lot when I'm coaching people. Can I just say guilt and anxiety? Guilt is always about something in the past. And so letting it go could be the best thing you ever did, because letting go of the past negatives is the best thing you can ever do. Nothing that you did up to a second ago is going to affect you for your future unless you let it. Nothing. So when guilt comes up, I'd like you to cut the cords to it. You know what? I'm not going to feel guilt anymore. I choose to let it go, because it's always reflective of something in the past. Whereas anxiety is always reflective of something in the future. Anxiety is simply the inability to see something successful in the future. So guess what? We can walk into the future, pretend that we're already there, and now we're no longer anxious because we can see the picture of what we want to create. So even though these things seem huge in some people's worlds, what I love about what we do is we allow it to change very quickly, just through a couple of processes.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So who'd like to let guilt go today?
Yes, please.
Yeah? So feeling guilty, no. Next. Cut the cords. So the word next now is going to be your best friend because it will close down the dendrite that brings that guilt up. So you're now not going to let the dendrite in your brain that's got guilt on it come to the surface. So you're going to go next. I even shake my head. Next. I don't think like that anymore. So I think, how can I make that happen? Yeah, how can I make it happen? That's my favorite saying, because otherwise if I'm focused on only going forward with one part of my body, it's not enough, because the other part's focused on all the guilt and the lack that I had in the past. Forget that. Who wants that? I want all of the energy going forward. Yeah, so there's no room for guilt, not in my backpack. Yeah, let it go. So I hope you've learned something today. I hope you've learned a heap about values. I'd love to take it further. So let's do that. We're going to actually start some coaching very soon. And if you want to join our coaching group, it'd be great. And I'd love to take you through changing those values, where you can find out what's really purposeful for you and what you are, what's important, and also how we can release any limiting belief that's attached to it. There's also a couple of values we can add to your list by thinking about what excited you before you went and did a job, etc. So, and what happened in your world when you left a job? What were those things that you had to go through? Was it about recognition? Was it about moving forward? Do those things excite you as a value? And some people will leave their job simply because there's no room to move here. Some people leave a relationship because there's no room to move here. Does that make sense? So it's about those values coming up, and are they? And sometimes when we do that, they're the main values that people end up living with. So it's a wonderful process. I just wanted you to know how values are formed and how values drive your behavior, because they're deemed important by you. And that's why if something happens, you're at work, something happens to your family, and your values are really high for family, you will leave that work and you will go and attend to the family. But if your values are so high in career, your other thought may be, I know other people will be able to deal with that. And it gets dealt with. Does that make sense? It's not good, bad, or ugly. It just is the way you value things. But it gives you a reason.
Sorry, can I just ask a question? So how do you know what's your top value, like number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5?
Because you just wrote them down.
But that is just one thing we write though.
Yes. So now if you want to do it again, do the same process. I'm going to send this out as a recording and choose another area. So if you want to have a look at your values around career and or relationship and or lifestyle, do the same exercise and write out what do you value around your family? What do you value around, and start knowing what your values are around each of these areas.
But how do you know whether your work actually is more important, your career is more important than
Who can answer that question? Who can answer that question?
When situation happens, is it?
Yeah.
She can answer that question.
I guess, Lynda, what I take on from many of your speeches and lectures and workshops is that it's very important to be spontaneous. Whatever comes up, don't think, just write it down. Am I right in that?
So if you're in your career, right, and something happens at home, what do you do? What drives your behavior? To stay at your career or to go home? What's the answer? What drives your behavior?
What's my answer? I think it depends on the situation. If it's very urgent, I think definitely, yeah, I will go home. But if it's not that urgent, I will still stay on my work.
Yeah.
That's my answer.
And
that's
so
why
your values are around what's urgent. What's urgent in your world may be very different to my world. So when I'm in the middle of Holland and they ring me about my son not being well, I thought, oh, well, you know, he's never been sick. He'll be fine. And then I go, book me on the next plane. I even shocked myself about my value being so high around family. And of course, with my dad passing away last year, I gave him my whole year. I just left my work and I didn't think I could do that, but I did. And I loved it. And I have no regrets whatsoever. Does that make sense? So you're driving whatever behavior, whatever you're doing, whatever drives your behavior will be your value. So it's what's important to you will come up for you.
Well, you have similar values across those different areas. So, for example, like what Chin was saying, like maybe urgency is something that's quite important for her. So I'm thinking, like, from my perspective, of course, when I wasn't a mom, career was very important. Now that I'm a mom and a single parent, it's becoming more evident that the value on family and the value on raising my son is top priority on all aspects of my life. Whether the decisions I make in career, the decisions I make in finance, the decisions I make in personal development are really driven by me being able to care and look after and guide my son through this journey in life. So that has changed significantly for me. And even in the relationships that I'm starting to have, I say to the men that I meet, my son is a priority. Whatever happens, he will be a priority. If I can't see you, tough luck. I'm not going to bend backwards. And I think for me that has changed over the last few years. And like what you said, and I think for me, it's really about that sense of belonging and caring in all aspects of my life. And I see that quite strongly now with choosing to having that focus on my son and making sure that he's the best person that he could possibly be.
Absolutely. Yes, thank you. Thank you. That's wonderful. I've been so devoted to work recently that I haven't seen my son. And I actually said to him, you are my priority next week. Whatever you want, time with your mum, I'm there for you. And we're meeting literally 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. So it's about, that drives my behavior too. But then he's an older child. He's an older adult now. So it's not like he wants me around that often anyway. Please. So once a month is fine, Mum. However, do we text often? Yes. But then, there's all these other areas, like you say, that what are my values and do I give it enough time? Have I been giving my spirituality enough time? Have I been giving my health enough time? What do I value about health and when do I go off the track? And why are we now all doing detoxes? Because we value health. And without great health, how can we have, good family? How can we have a great career where we've got the energy, etc., etc.? So your values definitely will change as different scenarios come into your life. And your values in different areas will change. So what do you want to focus on? I find I focus on something and I'm totally focused on that. And I'll just make sure that picks up, then I'll go to that. And that allows me to write a book a year, etc.
So can I say, like, it's kind of like potentially, or is that it depends on the time you unconsciously spend on. So that kind of reflects your value as well. Like how much time I spend on something.
It's not about the time, it's about what you're prepared to give that. So it's basically, if I look at a situation in my life, what's driving me to do this right now? What's driving me to talk to you people? What's driving that? What's important to me that drives me to sit here for free and teach people? Because I value people. I absolutely value you. I value people's potential. It's so important that for me, it's a huge importance that people realize the value that they have inside of them. And if I can be one of those people that helps them bring those values up to the forefront, then I want to be a champion of that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Does that make sense?
I think it might be a good idea. Like for me, I will, after this and throughout the next few days, go through the same exercise on the different aspects of my life and see if there are some similarities. And maybe the more I see it on paper and the more because I can also be very visual, the more I see it on paper, the more it becomes clear for me which ones are really, standing out and really driving certain behaviors. But I guess sometimes if you don't have that process, well, for me, I don't have that. If I didn't have this process, I probably will just like, oh yeah, maybe that's it, maybe that's it, maybe that's it. But spending time to say, okay, this is what I can
Yeah.
do. Maybe it's a good process for me to go through in the next few days.
Great, thank you. And everyone can do that, take the time to do that. Can I just say that Zoom has sent me a message that they'd like to cut me off again. So I'm going to say goodbye to all of you.
Lynda, sorry, can I ask one more question?
Yes.
Just a quick one. What's one book that really impact your life? Is there any
One book, The Secret.
The Secret. Yeah,
The Secret, and also Think and Grow Rich, because it teaches you to value you.
Thank you.
And that was huge for me, because we were taught to value everyone else, and to value me was a huge turnaround. It took a lot of clearing and a lot of change, you know, because when we were kids growing up, it was about, you know, go to your room if you're thinking about yourself.
Yeah.
Well, now I want you to think about yourself. It's very different, and that's good. And they're beautiful people. I loved my mum and dad, but it was just a different thing at the time. So yeah, I loved those books were brilliant. I mean, I've got a myriad of books. Wayne Dyer's books were brilliant, you know.
I grew up Unity.
Yeah.
Yeah, I grew up Unity, and I just want to let you guys know, you know, trust yourself.
Yes.
You know, we're all so different. Many women love having children. I'm that way. Grandchildren. Some don't. They love their dogs, and that's just fine. And you know, we stop judging who we are and just be. And a big value for me, because I didn't know why I was on this call in the true sense, but it was because I grew up Unity. So, and I know Wayne Dyer and all of that. But sitting here and listening to you, I have some notes. And one of mine is mentorship is the top of my list, and for my career, because I've fortunately done well. So as we're talking, my mentee just texted me, we just made it to Shark Tank.
Woo!
Shark Tank America, right?
Congratulations.
Yeah, I mean, and I was telling her, you know, mentors have to be mentored. And I'm on this call right now, and then she said, I can't wait, I have to tell you, we made Shark Tank. And so I want to share that with you. Trust and believe, you know, trust yourself, trust your intuition. Yeah, it's inside of you.
Yeah, work on the
All the
relationship
power
you
is
have
you.
with you. Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And you're good.
I'm kind of doing now. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to say goodbye. Have a wonderful week, everyone, and I'll see you in 2 weeks. We're going to do clearing, letting go a limit. I'm going to do a group clearing. So come on and bring your limiting belief and allow me to let it go for you. So you're going to let it go. I don't change anyone, but I do a lot of instigating.
We'll send
so
a link.
Much.
We'll send a link to everyone, Lynda.
Yes, super.
Thank you.
Okay, bye
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you so
Thank you
much,
for your
Lynda.
input.
Bye-bye. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye-bye.
Lynda, just to let you know, Millie, my dog, has just come back from church this morning, Presbyterian church.
On you, Millie.
Thank you.
That's gorgeous.
Thank you.